and welcome to the Clearwater County Broadband Committee meeting for September 17th, 2024. All meetings are live streamed and recorded. Any written or verbal information provided may be included in public documents as per the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act 41. So I'll call the meeting to order at 9:02. And we have an agenda before us. Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Graham, thank you. All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
Thank you. Just a reminder that Councillor Northcott is joining us electronically today. And so with that, that motion is carried to adopt the agenda. Looking at the Broadband Committee meeting minutes of August 2nd, 2024. Any comments, errors, or a motion? Deputy Reeve Melhoff.
Thank you, Reeve. In reviewing the minutes, I think that there's a motion that has been missed. So I'm just requesting that staff go back and review, and then I would make a motion to table until that review can take place.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor to table?
I'm in favor.
Thank you. And that motion is carried. Moving on to corporate services, item 4.1 is the Legacy Business Plan Refresher. And I will turn it over to Mr. McDonald.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. First off, I'd like to introduce our guests here from Arcadis, Keith Potton and Veronique Pornier. I might be pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry. And then we should probably do our normal
For sure.
introductions.
All right, so
Thanks.
we will do council introductions this morning. Go ahead.
Good morning, I'm Sydney Graham, Councillor for Division 2.
Good morning. Daryl Wahid, Councillor, Division 3.
Welcome, Jenny Melhoff, the Councillor for Division 1 and Deputy Reeve.
And good morning, Michelle Swanson, Division 7 Councillor and Rave. And then we'll go to the online.
Good morning. Jordan Northcott, Division 4 Councillor. Apologies, I can't be there in person.
Good morning, Brian Cermak, Councillor for Division 6.
Good morning, Murray Hagan, Director of Corporate Services.
Good
morning. Rhonda Sirhan, Manager of Financial Services.
Good morning, Rick Emmons, CEO.
And good morning, Cam McDonald, Information Technology Manager.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. And we should introduce David as well.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
And David Pickett is on joining us remotely. He's our financial analyst.
Hello, everyone.
So I'll start. Good morning again. So basically, if we can put up the PowerPoint, that'd be fantastic. So we can go over the first part. I guess I'll go over staff recommendation while we're getting the PowerPoint up. But the staff recommendation is that the Broadband Committee accepts the Broadband Business Plan Refresher for presentation for information and directs, and then the second part to this, and we'll get to it obviously, the direct administration to develop a strategic document that includes fiber to the X, fiber to the home for network going forward. So do that. And then we give Tracy a minute here. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Awesome. So anyways, some of the topics we'll be talking about are from our 2023 discussion that we had in closed session. So for discussions outlined, we're going to be talking about UBF capital expenditure, funding summary, operating forecast, break-even analysis, and return of investment payback money. So really what I should have done was switch slides. That was my technical problem. But anyways, if you can go to the next slide. Sorry, Tracy. being pushy. Basically, what we're talking about first, the first part is sort of the refresher part, is the legacy information. We presented to committee January 23rd, 2023. And today's presentations aims to provide a refresher for the Broadband Committee and the general public too also, so they can be included in our past decisions. What I also want to propose is the development of a comprehensive go-forward strategy, including vision and objectives, financial planning and budgeting, marketing, sales analysis, risk management, engagement, and customer experience and support. So really the first section of it would be the financial planning and budgeting. Obviously, we would go forward. So this will be a strategy, not so much as a business plan, it's a strategy going forward for us as a group. So we will be talking about visions, objectives, the financial, all these risks in following meetings, so that we've got, it's actually going to be developed as a live document. It will change. It will always change. And that's the idea of it. You know, you change your thing, you change it. It's a roadmap for us really to follow in the long run. Really what I'd like to do after this, if there's any questions in this sort of support, just please ask along the way. But the next slide I'm going to hand over to Keith and Arcadis for description. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate the time this morning.
Just time out. Your mic needs to be on, sorry. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cam. Appreciate the time this morning to review this material. To reinforce that this is a refresher of the information that was presented in January 23. So you will see references to dates across the bottom, future charts, et cetera, that have not been updated in terms of the date timeline. We all know it was a bit of a long journey to get the UBF grants submitted, approved, and finalized. So in the updated strategy document that Cam just referenced, we will of course be updating dates to current and our current understanding of project timelines. The slide that is currently up right now is a summary of the capital costs that are involved with each of the UBF grants, broken out as a breakdown of total project costs in terms of eligible costs that are grant funding eligible, the grant award, and the Clearwater County portion to match the grant. This slide is a summary of the projected revenue forecasts from broadband operations. You'll see there are three components to the slide. The base bar, or the lowest bar on the screen, is the revenue that is projected from backbone operations. So as the county had proceeded without grant funding to complete backbone projects prior to the UBF funding for local access projects, or fiber to the home projects, there was a backbone business plan in place where revenue would be coming in from sales of capacity on the backbone in this market, and that plan is currently progressing and is active. The backbone is active. There's a very thin slice in yellow called lit services. Those are services that are sold by lighting the fiber using the investment in electronics that have been made. And the gray bar that sits on top is the wholesale revenue from the fiber to the home program. So these are the revenue projections that are built up in terms of revenue that would be expected to be coming in. As I referenced, in the refresh of this plan, of course, we will be adjusting the dates to reflect our current understanding of when the investments will be made. And the simplest adjustment to that is we'll be reviewing, adjusting, and shifting everything to the right a bit in terms of the years across the bottom. There we go. So we were just looking at a revenue slide. These are the operating cost assumptions. So this is the cost side of the network. And you'll see the major cost components identified in the legend across the bottom in terms of staffing costs. These are Clearwater County staff costs, network operations and maintenance, and additional and costs around customer service and administration. That total up to the red line across the top, which is the summation of the operating costs. There's when we're talking about things like customer service costs, reinforcing that the open access business model is a wholesale model. So these are the customer service costs from the county's perspective to support all the retail internet service providers that will be coming on the network. It's the retail internet service providers that will be touching and interacting with individual subscribers and customers. So these are just the costs to support those retailers, to support them in terms of onboarding and providing them a platform to operate and providing them wholesale data to be able to send out accurate bills every month as they come onto the network. This third chart, I think, which is probably the most illustrative in terms of break-even analysis, and I'm going to ask my colleague David to also comment on this chart, is simply the overlay of the previous two charts. So we've overlaid the expected revenue streams over top of the costs, and from a pure break-even analysis, we see where those two lines start to cross, where cash flow becomes positive. This is operating cash flow. It does not, this analysis doesn't consider the capital investment that's gone in. This is the operating cash flow. So it answers the question of, on a month-over-month basis or a year-over-year basis, when does the money coming in become greater than the money going out on an operational model? David, any further commentary on this slide?
Actually, Keith, I think you covered it very holistically. The only other thing I would just point out is, as indicated on the slide, we did forecast, I guess, 3 years into the program that there would have been that point where the revenues brought in from the broadband program would exceed the operating costs. So, that would be a kind of a key milestone to target. And the other thing I would try and point out is, without the access revenue, which is the darker gray bar on the top, you'll always kind of see a gap between the revenues that were generated from the backbone and lit service business and the typical operating costs that would be required to run that program. So the operating costs did increase when you add the open access element. However, they don't increase by substantially that much more as you're able to leverage some of your fixed costs that you have from the backbone business as well to run the wholesale open access business. So just by, we had it forecasted originally between 2025 and 2026. Obviously those will need to be updated with we'll have to move things forward a bit once we forecast updated timelines for projects being completed and when things will actively get going.
Very good. Yep, thank you.
Go ahead, Deputy Reed Miller. Question?
Thank you, Reeve. So just to confirm then, if this was a backbone only project, this project would run a deficit in perpetuity and be on the public purse forever. But since council has taken the initiative and administration has taken the initiative to expand this program, it will not only cover its operating costs, but it looks like after 2026, which will be moved a couple of years since it took a little while to hear back from the federal government, it looks like we can start putting money back into capital updates to the system and or return on the investment from the public purse. Am I reading the chart right?
Yeah, absolutely correct. I want to put a little caveat around the backbone business though, is that we were very, very conservative. We were saying we were only getting one customer, for example. So again, that'll be reviewed too in the newer financial structure, and I think that'll be a change to the positive too.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. He'll need his light on.
If
Yeah,
I'm
that's
controlling
okay.
it
No,
or-
and I appreciate the hesitation. Wait, so just so that
Thank
the
you.
people on live stream understand, we are in training today, and it works good. It's good. We are very patient today.
Been here
It's all
enough, I
good.
should know.
It's all good. Thank you. Continue,
Very
please.
good, we'll continue. All right, we've done a few different slices of this break-even analysis. So if we could move to the chart that's labeled break-even analysis UBF projects only. So David, perhaps I'll get you to jump in on this, but really what we're trying to isolate and analyze here are different views of the finances. And this is a chart that reflects only UBF projects, but knowing that there's more projects that have been completed than UBF, certainly. One of the key metrics in the telecommunications industry, whether you're a private or a public operator, is what's called penetration rate. This is how many subscribers actually sign up for services versus the number of subscribers that your network will pass. So common metrics are homes passed, so you may pass 10 homes, but if you only successfully sign up 7 and convince them to take service, then your penetration rate is a percentage. So if you pass 10 and only sign up 6, you've got a 60% penetration rate. So it's a key metric to understand when you're looking at from I'll say a success and how many paying customers you need to share the numbers here. So you'll see the number referenced of 1,170 subscribers. That is the basis of the analysis and the operating break-even point. So it's an analysis based on assuming that not every subscriber you pass will sign up for service, but you need to have a certain success rate in order to achieve these results.
Thank you. Question from Deputy Reeve Melhoff.
Thank you, Reeve. So you mentioned the penetration rate. What is the penetration percentage for 1,170?
David, I'll ask you to help me with that answer. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. I can quickly figure that out. I thought I had that on another slide. We might have.
I think I can, offhand, I think it's 25%, if I remember correctly.
Conservatively
Yeah, very, yeah, typically.
25%.
Typically in this industry, people look for 60% penetration rate, and we're using 25%.
So this graph could look drastically different.
Exactly, and this was a presentation a year and a half ago, so
For sure.
everything is going to be adjusted for sure.
Absolutely. I don't believe that this was a public meeting a year and a half ago, so I'm just trying to make sure that we're explaining some of this stuff to the public as well. So, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, and just to reinforce those points, certainly, of course, not every subscriber experience in I'll say publicly run networks under an open access model. It's not unusual to see penetration rates of 60% after a couple years of operation. you know, I have to throw in the caveats of your results may vary, and all those things, but what will help us really dial in the expected penetration rate is when we start to do community engagement and a mechanism for people to express their interest and put themselves on sign-up lists. That will give us a much better picture of exactly what our penetration rate is and where more investment may be recommended from a marketing perspective to get the word out and encourage participation. We'll move to the next slide. This is a cut of that same break-even analysis, but based on all projects. So of course, you've invested in a backbone network prior to the UBF grants. You can't uninvest in a backbone. It's there. It's literally a sunk cost. And this is the same analysis being done with all projects. You know, the synergy between the backbone program and the fiber to the home program is excellent. There's not duplicate geographic investments, so this analysis doesn't really move the dial in terms of the operating break-even and subscriber count. It's a different number, but it's close to the same number. I'm going to throw the next few slides to David to walk us through the return on investment, and certainly there's perhaps a bit of a primer required just on from a financial perspective what we're measuring when we talk about return on investment. So David, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the first one was just looking at the return on investment and the payback that the county would require, or basically experience from pursuing just the UBF projects, which excluded 2 other potential projects that we had applied for but were not conditionally awarded. So the first key area we looked at was what's the net investment, including the sunk costs in the backbone network that preceded the proposed costs that would be required to fulfill all of the conditionally awarded UBF projects. So the net investment we determined was 47.7 million, which took the backbone costs plus took the costs of completing all 5 of those UBF projects, but then deducted the grants received and offset those against the total costs and the outlays that the county would be making to fulfill those projects. So, and then we also forecasted some one-time connection fee charges in our model, which also, it was not a tremendous amount, but it also offset some of the outgoing costs. So keeping that in mind, we then overlaid the operating profile of the project, looking at the cash flow that the project would generate over time. And we wanted to then take the total investment. So if you look at the screen, the red bars basically reflect the net outgoing investment that the county has made. And those, when you start to add those up, they start to make that green cumulative cash flow bar go further deep, I guess, lower on the chart. But then it starts to head back towards, the top of the chart over time, as positive cash flow then starts to pay that back over time. So so we basically took that into consideration, and we were able to determine a payback period with that in mind. So we had 30 years as a payback period for just these UBF projects. The return on investment, when we took an average of, or not an average, but we looked at all of the cash flows and then took those back to present value, basically was about 1%. So that's what the project's return was generating each year when you take into the cash flows that we had forecast. And we wanted to just note that if it was a private infrastructure investor looking to kind of participate in this type of project, the typical returns they would be seeking would be 8 to 14% rather than 1%, and the payback periods would be less than 20 years instead of closer to 30 years. So I think that just kind of reflects the rural and maybe less investable nature that ISPs are not necessarily looking to go out and make these types of investments on their own, and therefore require kind of public support to make these projects investable.
Thank you, David. I'll overlay a couple of other comments. To reinforce, this return on investment analysis also includes all the capital that is going in to build the infrastructure. So this is, rather than the previous discussion where we were just looking at money in, money out on an operating basis, this also looks at, if you are a private investor or looking to get a return, get your capital back, how long does it take to get your capital fully paid back? Reinforcing David's comments, in the private sector, there are communications companies, and you can read their annual reports that look to deploy capital, to make a return on capital, and pay their shareholders a dividend. This suggests, this reflects the nature of rural broadband in that these projects are not investable by the private sector. It doesn't meet investment hurdles they would be looking for. But as a public investment, you can put this in the same asset class category of investing in road infrastructure, for example, where roads exist and are built and improved to provide for the general economic development within a community. Roads never really give you a return. They will, a direct return, unless they're toll roads, which in most cases they're not. They just represent an ongoing maintenance expense once they're built, but they're there to enable business, to attract residents and businesses to the county and further increase the economic livelihood within the county. So.
Yep, got a question here from Debbie Reed-Milhoff, please.
Thank you, Reeve. And just remind me how long this build is supposed to be good for. If I remember correctly, it's 50 years. So we have a return on capital investment in 30, and our network has been built out to potentially 50 years, if I'm remembering correctly, if not longer, if we take good care of it. Yeah, absolutely correct. And we're just take good care of it, be good stewards of it, do the proper maintenance, spend the time and effort. And they do have pieces of fiber in the ground that have been in there for years. I remember putting fiber back in 1985 or 86, and it's still there working, so. So then we'd have 20 years of building a reserve fund to help rebuild the network in the stages it may need to be rebuilt in if it does need to be done. And it's really not the fiber, that infrastructure that need be replaced. It's always the electronics on the other ends. Things change, and needs change, and nothing but going up. I imagine we'll need more and more and more and more bandwidth for everything. So absolutely, that's the way it works.
Perfect, thank you. And I like your analogy about the roads, Keith, but I would also, going back 100 years, they were wagon trails. They weren't paved roads that we have today. So with time, things and technology, everything else gets a lot better, and our level of expectation as a society increases too. So this project will have a level of expectation too. So I think we can meet that. So thank you for the analogy.
I appreciate your comments. I mean, there's many other sort of, I'll call them generational investments in infrastructure that have been made. Railways are another great example, as well as the electrification, the electric system that continues to drive economic development.
Yeah. Please continue.
All right, let's move on to the next slide, and David, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Keith. So basically, it's a very similar analysis to the prior slide. However, what we've done here is we've added the full cost of the non-funded projects, and that has increased the net investment by about $22 million in capital expenses. So the net investment's gone up from 47.7 million up to 73.8 million. There would be a few additional one-time charges recovered because, as you've spent additional capital, you've also potentially connected over 1,050 potential subscribers, in fact, to the network. But you didn't receive any government subsidy to offset that outgoing investment. So, as you can see, the green shaded area kind of goes a little bit deeper and takes a little bit longer to be paid back before it kind of crosses the break-even point on the right, just above, just before 2055. So, we've estimated the payback period there to be approximately 34 years, and then the return on investment, or the IRR, to be 0.5%, so lower than in the previous case, just because more cash is being expected to be outlaid up front by the county in order to fulfill those projects, and it's taking a longer time to get that paid back, and therefore it reflects in a lower overall return.
Thank you. In summary, what we've presented today is a recap of the financial analysis that was done in January of 23. Our intention is to go back and refresh that, but it certainly draws out. Here's the 25% number we were searching for earlier. It points out in very concrete terms how many subscribers are required to reach break-even points, gives us firm targets to hit. And I will emphasize again that this is a very conservative analysis. The UBF program is exclusively focused on connecting residents. Of course, as the fiber goes by and connects residents, it will also go by the door of businesses. So what needs to be done in the refresh of this document is to do a comprehensive view of the market opportunity that will include businesses as we're getting through our concept design phases, and add that to the financial analysis. So and it also provides I'll say a baseline from a pure return on investment perspective of what the payback and timeframes are.
Perfect. All right, go ahead, Ms. Serhan.
Yeah, I just have a question about the assumed, excuse me, the assumed revenues in the analysis that was done in 2023, and comparing that to what we've actually seen for revenues this first year. Would you say the revenues are higher than what was projected in the first year of this analysis over what we've actually seen this first year?
So we get a bit muddy in terms of what is the first year because some of the investment was delayed. So we're just at the point of reconciling the pure backbone revenue, which was a much smaller portion of the plan, yes, to the projection. So that is actually part of the next phase of the refresh, is to reconcile that, yeah, and reset the calendar timeline so we're measuring accurately. But of course, there's no we're at least a year away from any wholesale revenue from a fiber to the home program. So.
Right, but I guess my question is, the revenues are higher than what we had expected or projected in the plan. Is that
the I'll have to go and do that analysis.
Okay.
What we want to do is actually reconcile the actual revenues to date, yeah, on the backbone plan versus the actual costs to date. Yeah. And, okay. And kind of recalibrate that, yep, based on known information.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Northcott, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Regarding there is an area in Clearwater County that had received no grants. Is that correct?
Can you repeat your question? You broke up there for a minute.
Sorry, I was just wondering if there's an area in Clearwater County that did not receive any grants for fiber through the X. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, absolutely, that's correct. That was our phase 3 application. And we still have an application into the CRTC for that area also. No news back, just surprise. So we've got that, and you know, as we go forward and meet other ISPs and people that may want to invest with us, we could go forward in other ways besides just that granting system.
Right. So I guess my question is, there's been discussion about net investment and rate of return and stuff like that, but I'm just, was the, like, with those residents in that area, would they just be neglected and not served with no fiber? Or is there an opportunity to include, because I don't know if that would be fair to not, if you're going to run fiber everywhere, would you not have to run it to that area as well? And then with those numbers and that investment, then would have to also be calculated in.
Mr. Hager, I was going to say Ms. Hager again,
And-
sorry.
Estimated.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, committee members and welcome guests. Councillor Northcott, actually, the slides that were presented, that's the key differential between the ones that looked at a break even for all the UBF funded projects, and then the break even as well as the projected operating revenue and expenses for all projects. That's exactly what we're looking at, is if we as a county serve those areas that were not awarded UBF grants, then those break-even numbers change. So that's why we're presenting both of those scenarios for full disclosure on that. The intention is to service as many residents and businesses in the county as we possibly can, realizing that where we don't have that grant revenue, it's going to take more public funds to accomplish that. And on that note, I'd also like to add that the other UBF application that was denied included the Chicken Ranch Road area. Mr. McDonald, and with the help of our partners at Arcadis, were able to negotiate with the federal and provincial governments to get those included in the approved grants. So we've actually come out further ahead there, and that's another item that needs to be considered as we update these documents, is that we now have funding for those areas, which I think is an extreme positive.
Any follow-up, Councillor Northcott?
Nope, no follow-up, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Cermak?
Yes, I would like to go back to the return on investment, payback all projects. I just need to get this straight in my mind. By the look of this graph, it says from now until year 2027, Clearwater County is going to invest $73.8 million in this to push this ahead. Is that right? According to the graph.
Yeah,
That is right.
that's correct. So, but it's not 73.8 million. So there's an amount that's already been spent on the backbone, which I think was around 22 million. I'll have to double check the exact number, but yes. So it would be, from now going forward would just be for the access projects, which would be a subset of that 73.8 million. But there was already some that had spent. The net investment just incorporated all the prior investments that were made, from 2020 in 2019, 2020.
Ms. Director Hagan?
Thank you. And Councillor Cermak, also keep in mind that the 73.8 figure needs to be revisited for a couple of reasons. As David has pointed out, it does include the costs that we've already spent on the project to date on the core backbone, included assumptions of everything the county would need to invest going forward, and also still assumed that the grant revenue was somewhat less compared to what we've actually negotiated. So all these numbers need to be revised, so I take the 73.8 with a grain of salt. We will be reanalyzing that and bringing back a new number that shows more up to date. The other thing, of course, that's going to have changed is our cost projections on this. Inflation has occurred, significant inflation, since we initially put in those applications, so that needs to be built into these revisions to the analysis as well.
Yeah, because the inflation rate that I see, at least in my business that I'm doing, the inflation rate's anywhere from 20 to 30%. So if you take the 22 off of here, you're still left with investing 51 million plus 20%. So you're pretty close to 60 million in the next 2 years, 3 years to get this project off the ground and running. Is my numbers right, or am I way out in left park?
Director Hagan.
It's probably difficult to answer that question at this point. We know the numbers will change, and our intention is to develop an up-to-date strategic document that we can bring back to the committee and inform the public as to what those revisions are. So I can't confirm or deny the exact amount of inflation. I expect there will be inflation on there. There will also be adjustments to the grant revenue to a certain extent. So there will be changes coming, and that's what we're looking forward to. So keep in mind, this document is dated now, but we wanted to bring it back. We wanted to share it with the public now that we can, now that the embargoes have been released off our grant announcements and so forth. And this is our starting point moving forward and getting you the best information we possibly can.
Thank you. You're good, or do you have a follow-up question?
I do have a follow-up question. The analogy that was with the roads, I do want to clarify one thing, that roads, excuse me, are mandated by the government that we do that. This is not mandated. This is a nice to have. I want that out and clear. We are not mandated to do this. Thank you.
Deputy Reeve Meloff?
Thank you, Reeve. Director Hagan, the number 4 slide that's here, I was under the understanding that analysis was also, it was including some areas that we haven't decided that we were actually gonna do, because we haven't said we're gonna do the areas we didn't get grants for. And this also assumed that we were not able to include the unbuilt backbone in the fiber to the home build out. So there's, several $1 million that is included in this that won't be required because it's now being built, added into the fiber to the home. And this council has not made a decision to go out into the areas that were not grant funded. So that this graph in my brain is way off. So to go by this one may not be necessarily accurate. Am I correct in my assumption?
You are correct, Deputy Reeve. As we said, this analysis overall and the graphs that support it need to be revised for changes that have occurred since the applications were put in. And definitely, we anticipate we're going to see some cost savings for areas where we haven't built core backbone yet. We can incorporate that into our build, so we will see some savings there. And as well, you're right, council nor the broadband committee have not made decisions yet on those unfunded areas. So this assumes yes to everything. That may not necessarily be the case.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Serhan?
Yeah, I just want to clarify the mandate on the roads. The mandate on the roads is to keep the roads safe for the existing roads that are there, and however many roads that are in Clearwater County was a past decision of past councils and inherited into this council and next council and the council after. And there isn't a mandate to have any surface roads within Clearwater County, and that's a level of service that's a choice by council.
Thank you. So with that, we've officially ended this item, correct? We just need some staff.
I'll speak to a little bit.
sure.
And I'll don't want to waste your time. So this document was built in January 2023. So we do want to go forward with an updated strategy, and that's really what we want to get out of this, is that we want to go forward with a new strategy and a roadmap, and that's sort of what the purpose of this is, and that's sort of the excitement to come is pretty cool. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so there's a couple of recommendations in our staff recommendations for this item. One of them is to accept the business plan refresher presentation for information. Okay, Councillor Lawson. Thank you, Councillor Lougheed. So the accepting the presentation for information. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
This is only for information.
Is
I'm
this
in
a
favor.
yeah.
For information.
Okay. And then thank you, that motion is carried. And then the second recommendation is that directs administration to develop a strategy document that includes Fibre to the X network. So with that one, Deputy Reeve Melhoff.
Thank you, Reeve. What is that? Can we dive into what that we're asking you to do here?
So if we go back to the very second slide, if we could, sorry guys. So basically what it's gonna do, it's basically the business plan, but it's a strategy. It's a roadmap going forward so that we know what we're spending, when we're spending it, doing a risk analysis, doing things like marketing and sales and presenting it to you. It's gonna be a teamwork, so probably one more slide up, sorry. I think I might be wrong there. So it's gonna give us our financial planning and budgeting, which we know well in this business. We're gonna look at marketing and sales analysis, our risk management, our engagement, our customer experience and support, our vision meaning the Broadband Committee's vision of going forward. How do we see the outcome? What's our objectives for the next 2 years, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, and out. So that's what this strategy document is. Because we came from a business plan that we had, and we were presenting a business plan, but now as a whole, we can call it whatever we want, but it's a business strategy going forward on how we develop and grow with this business, if that helps.
Yep.
My vagaries.
Go ahead, Deputy Reeve.
Thank you, Reeve. I don't necessarily see the benefit, and maybe you can explain what the benefit would be. I would rather see you guys putting energy to putting glass in the ground.
Yeah.
Like, put glass in the ground, get people hooked up, so we can start seeing that the red line be surpassed. Like, putting more energy towards more paperwork when we should just be putting glass in the ground. I don't know if there's benefit, but you can explain what the benefit would be.
I'll leave it to somebody with a little
Director Hagan.
better speaking.
Thank you. I'm very confident we can do both with the talent of our staff and the support of our consultants. And I think it's absolutely necessary for transparency and to let the public know what the plan is. And this strategy document, one, updates these figures that you've seen today. It also goes further, and I want to touch on the Fibre to the X. Folks might not understand what that means. The UBF grants were specific to Fibre to the home, but that doesn't mean, as Mr. Ponton pointed out, we're going past businesses and installations and so forth that we can't offer them service along the way and increase those revenue amounts as well. So that's why we've chosen X, because it can be a business, it can be a tower that provides wireless service to agriculture and so forth. It's numerous, the opportunities, and that's what we really want to expand on. Is now that we have the privilege of these grants coming in to allow us to economically move forward on this, and the decisions of this committee, that we can really take advantage of those opportunities going forward. So what we want to really focus on is transparency more than anything. And it's great for us to be putting fiber in the ground, but we also want to tell people we're doing it and why we're doing it, and really look at that engagement both with the public and with businesses potentially.
Deputy Reeve Mello?
Thank you, Reeve. Thank you, I appreciate that. Will this delay any build? Like, we can do them simultaneously? We can, because I just don't want to say, let's study something or let's build something and not actually build it. Like, let's build something.
No, that's my mentality too. Yes, we'll multitask. I have great help. I have great engineering firm. I have fantastic staff and a lot of support. So yeah, we'll be working together on it. And it won't be a sidebar project, but it's very important, I think, for us to have a roadmap going forward. So you guys yourselves can speak to it publicly. And when we do our engagements, we have content actually to give to people too. So I think it'll be a super positive thing to go. And forward we march.
I don't think it'll be a spoiler alert, but as this item focused on planning, the very next item in the agenda focuses on action. And we'll be looking at some budget requests in order to enable us to start that acquisition of materials and start construction.
And I would agree that having this all updated and having, it totally is transparency. It's letting our ratepayers know and understand the projects and helping the councils today and in the future understand the path that we've taken forward and the decisions behind that. So, Councillor Cermak.
Yeah, kind of getting off the mainstream that everybody's thinking about here, but moving forward strategy. Is there any way that we can have a partnership with somebody else out there with this broadband? Is there a strategy plan that's available there? We've already invested 22 million.
Oh, 14.
We should have a percentage anyway.
We are actively looking for partners. We do have a few partners already signed up. And we have the biggest partner is the government of Alberta and the federal government that's invested 75%. So we are actually actively looking through the expressions of interest and that for other partners that would be in other areas. So yes, we are doing that. And that will be part of the strategy. Absolutely.
Okay, that is people investing money or companies investing money with us.
Money, time, and effort.
And that won't affect our grants if we do that.
No, it won't, and it won't affect it, especially in areas we're not doing. It won't affect the grant system. So it's sort of an in concert.
Okay, so we're actively looking for partnerships in this.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
because
that will be reflected in the strategies going forward so that we can be transparent about it and show you, the actual numbers and documents going forward.
okay, thank you.
All right, so we have a second motion in regards to, our second recommendation, that we develop a strategy document that includes fiber to the X network. So looking for someone to make the motion, I believe. Councillor Graham?
I'm the motion maker the last 2 days, so I'll make that motion. I think that it's really important to have the factual information out there and the marketing to get people to sign up so that we actually do make up all the costs of this and it's not a burden on the ratepayers forever. So I think it's important, and I want when we go out to the public, I want to have the updated factual information for them. I've said it before and I'll say it again, it sucked having to be handcuffed by the grants, and it's great that we received them and we're so fortunate, but I don't want to do that again. And I would like to have that information for the ratepayers, so I will make the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Any other comments or questions on that motion? Seeing, Director Hagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And perhaps just a quick point of clarification as well. We talk about the more subscribers, the better. Obviously, that's going to create more revenue for the county. But just to clarify, we're not directly receiving money from the subscribers. The subscribers would sign on with an internet service provider of their choice and pay them for those services. The internet service providers are in turn, as Mr. Ponton pointed out, purchasing wholesale. service or access from us. So that's the revenue. So absolutely, the more subscribers, the more revenue for the internet service providers and in turn for the county. But just to clarify, the money isn't directly to the county for those subscriptions.
Thank you for the clarification. All right, so motion's on the floor. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor North. Those opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you. All right, so moving on then to item 4.2 is the Broadband Fibre to the Home project, draft 10-year capital plan, and the 2024 capital budget adjustment. I believe that goes back to,
To me to start, and
Yes, please.
as I fumble around here. Thanks Keith and Veronique. So we'll start off.
thank you very much for
Oops,
coming in.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David. Okay, this is a little longer staff recommendation than normal, so, or it feels like it. So this is a request for decisions today for the 10-year capital, and also we've included the 2024 budget. Request budget reallocation, if I'm correct. Am I speaking? So the staff recommendation is that the committee recommends to council the Broadband Fibre to the X project draft 10-year capital plan, including 2025 capital budget with funding sources identified. And then the second recommendation is that the committee recommends to council a budget adjustment of $4,527,691 for procurement of materials and preparation for construction start in early 2025 of the Universal Broadband Fund grant projects, a UBF 3250 and 7123. That's the Ferrier area and the Nordegg area. And the conceptual designs and issuing RFPs and project management of the remaining Fibre to the X projects under the UBF for 2024 capital project budget to increased by $4,527,6991 with funding sources to be identified. Okay, so now if you can bring up probably the background part, Tracy, first, I think. As a little refresher for everybody in the general public and myself too, probably. On March 24th, 2023, the Broadband Committee, we had a meeting and determined that the Ferrier and the Nordegg areas to be first priority for the fiber to the home construction. On June 29th, 2023, the committee directed administration to proceed with option one as discussed in closed session. So it's nice for the general public to see what our option one was. So it was to commence the projects after agreements are signed. I'll do the costs, but they're a little out. 3,500,000 and, oh, that's for the 25% of total eligible costs of anyway, I'm messing that up, sorry. I'll reread it. Commencing the projects after agreements are signed, 3,529,443, 25% of the eligible plus 100% of ineligible costs. On April 18th, 2024, the committee recommended to the council the budget adjustment of $108,040 for the conceptual design to support issuing requests for proposals for fiber to the home for the Ferrier and Nordegg grants. On May 14th, council passed resolution 195/2013, which approved the budget adjustment. We'll go through the 2025 budget part first, and I may actually ask Mr. Hagan to do this part because he's much more versed in this area. So if you don't mind doing that part, thank you.
Go ahead, Director Hagan.
I think that's what they call reverse delegation. So what we've estimated in terms of actual beginning construction on the two UBF projects that Mr. McDonald identified, being the Farrier and Nordegg areas, as well as getting started on the conceptual design and the planning and materials, not only for those two projects, but for the next three that'll be started in either 2025 and carry on to 2026. Our whole objective here is to meet the constraints of the UBF grants, which require us to be all done by the end of 2026. So we're going to do our absolute best to meet those guidelines. So what this is looking at is each of the UBF grants related to the work that we anticipate to be completed in 2025, a total cost of $40.7 million, and funding for that, $14.3 million coming from each of the federal and provincial governments, leaves $12 million outstanding that requires a revenue source to be identified for that. So that's it in a nutshell. If there's specific questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay.
Go down a little bit further too, there's sort of a little bit better chart. If you go down the next page, I think it is. Maybe one more. There we go. That sort of helps sort of
Okay,
bring it all into a picture anyways, which I like.
there you go.
So for the 2025 budget season, we'd be asking for roughly 12 million, and then the 26 budget, we'd be asking for about roughly the same. And then for the 2024 is that 4,527,69, and it shows the portions across there. That's the government of Alberta and ISEDS, and then our unfunded part that we'd be asking for. And the reason we're asking for the 2024 part is to buy materials, i.e. conduit, fiber, anything that's out in the field that they can help start the process. And then also build the conceptual design for the RFPs, and start those so that we can put the other three RFPs out in January or so we can start the conceptual, put the bidding process in place. So we found that the last time we did this with the core backbone, we did the same thing. We bought the materials first so that the construction companies could start. The other thing is that if you typically give your included in a construction site or a construction RFP, they're going to add 5%, 10%, 20%, we don't know, on the cost. So it's a much, we can save budgetary, it's a better way to budget ours if we own the material and hand it out as inventory than it is for us to, add another 20% onto this project. So we did that last time, it was quite successful, and we can buy in bulk. Obviously, we're going to be buying a few things in bulk. So that's sort of where I'm going with that.
Director Hagan?
I concur with Mr. McDonald's comments, and further to that, we believe right now there's a window of opportunity for us to acquire these materials at a reasonable cost. And I'm not sure if all of the committee members are aware, but the United States has a grant funding program that is ramping up, and we anticipate that there's going to be increased demand for materials down there, probably starting in the next year or two. So I think we can get ahead of that potentially if we purchase the materials for all these projects right away.
Okay. Deputy Reeve Malloff?
Thank you, Reeve. You had mentioned that some of this budget adjustment is for conceptuals. I thought we already did a budget adjustment for that. We did a just over $100,000 budget adjustment for conceptual design.
Director Hagan?
As noted in the background information, absolutely, for the Nordegg and the Farrier UBF
So
project.
this is to get started on the other ones.
This gets us a start on the next three
Okay,
beyond that.
thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Councillor Lougheed?
Thank you, and I gather from what you're saying around the upcoming RFP process that within that, the county will be the source for the materials to be used within that, so that eliminates that variable. Okay, I
Absolutely.
appreciate.
And the other thing that sort of helps too is, we take possession of the inventory, we control the inventory, so there's no, lack of a better words, excuses, hey, we can't get this part, we can't get this part. We're handing it to you, you can go install it today.
Quality control.
Yeah.
Counselor Cermak.
I just need a clarification, and I guess, what is the meaning of the eligible costs of the grants? Who determines what is the eligible cost? Is it the government? Is it us? Is it independent people? Because this grant is 63 million approximately of eligible costs. Who determines that?
The federal
What
government.
the meaning of that is?
Yeah, so first off, who determines it is ISED and the government of Alberta, and they have it's in their documentation on what is allowed and what's not allowed. Some things like, we'll take examples of mileage, certain types of mileage aren't allowed, certain types of staying at a hotels are, it depends on the distance from like a center, say from Calgary to Rocky Mountain House. If it's too close, they won't, it's ineligible, but if it's far enough away, they will allow hotels for the crews, for example. So that's money that we, when we look through all the bills and we sort it out and we send it to them, and they say, this is eligible, this isn't ineligible. So it could be, as long as it's within their documentation, we're allowed to, I forget the wrong, oh geez, not a crew, but,
Requisition.
yeah, sort of requisition our parts and stuff like that. So it's little things like that that are not eligible. Stuff that you wouldn't want to pay for out of your own business, you know, those kind of things. Maybe if Mr. Higgins can sort of put a little wrap around a little bit, because I think I'm floundering.
Director Hagan.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. McDonald, it also reflects the costs of going past some of the properties that those governments would
Yes.
consider already served.
Yes, thank you.
Meeting the minimum standards of the CRTC specifications being the 5010. But it makes business sense for us to go down those roads and potentially improve their services along the way. So the governments may say, no, that's going to be ineligible, we're not going to pay for that. So we've included that in to say, and it will be reflected in the strategy document, is there's business opportunity there for us, and it makes investment sense to go ahead and do that. Does that help?
Sort of. I was just wondering if you could give a percentage, like is it 1 or 2% that could drop or plus? Or is it kind of like a contingency? It could be 25% plus or minus.
We don't necessarily expect it to change at this point. If our costs don't change, like, you know, inflation might have an influence on that and so forth. If we find inflationary pressure on those ineligible costs, clearly that's going to cost us a little bit more out of pocket. But the analysis has already been done by the government. They've determined what they considered eligible, what they considered ineligible in making their award of the grant overall. So we know what to expect there, and that was outlined in the previous agenda item in that very first chart of the costs. As you see, they pick up 75% of the eligible costs, doesn't equate to 75% of the total costs necessarily. As Mr. McDonald pointed out, we pick up 100% of the ineligible. So we'll be monitoring that as we go forward to see how those are behaving. We will definitely be trying to get recoup any and as much grant money as we possibly can for anything that we consider eligible.
Just a little sort
So
of.
then inflation won't go into that
It would.
oh, it would?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
And just for a little history, when we went up to Nordegg, there was eligible costs and ineligible costs when we went up there. It was maybe 1%. It wasn't very high. Then again, interest rates were a little bit less. All those kinds were a little less when we did that. So, you know, there'll be a bit of an adjustment, but as a whole, the federal government and the government of Alberta have been fantastic to work with those kind of things. There's a little flexibility in there too. So it's almost a bit of a negotiation sometimes too.
Jason, in thinking, I'm thinking 5% could be, what, $3 million?
Yeah,
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also with when we were going through the process,
Yeah. The long one.
along those lines, and in filling out those grant applications, the requirement was for 85% coverage, correct? Like it was for whatever reason. And we're not gonna follow that. We are doing a conceptual design and allowing everyone that equal access to this and understanding that, they may be ineligible according to ISED, but at the end of the day, we are saying, you're part of this county, you're gonna absolutely have the opportunity to say, yes, I want in, or no, I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And within reason, we're not gonna go down 100 miles or 100 miles, 100 kilometers to one house.
Right.
You know, realistically, but we could find alternatives. There's always alternatives to support those people. And those may be discussions that we bring forward in the future too.
Through our living document of what we just motioned as far as that. Perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so, excellent graph too, by the way. I like the way it's been laid out there. So we have, any questions or comments on the ask for, that the committee recommends to council the broadband fiber to the X project 10-year capital plan, including the 2025 capital budget with funding sources identified. Now, my question, Mr. Hand, is funding sources identified.
Sure, I can speak to that. So in the 2024 budget adjustment ask, it would be $3,125,900 increased grant revenue for 2024, and then the 1.4 million 1,791, we would need a funding source identified for that, and there's $2.1 million in contingency in 2024 because of the increase in tax revenue from earlier in the year that could be accessed, or we could look at one of the restricted surplus accounts. It would just be council's whatever they would choose, or this committee, whatever they would choose to recommend to council for that funding source. And then in 2025, of course, we're gonna have to talk about funding sources for Clearwater County's portion there. There's not one restricted surplus that would have that dollar amount in, so we'll have to have some discussions on the will of the committee on how to fund the 2025 and 2026.
Okay. All right. So the total amount, so I need some understanding here in regards to the UBF. So we will prepay and then the government will reimburse. Yes, thank you. That is the process. All right. So we need to identify funding sources. You said 2.1 in contingency. We have restricted surplus, and so the total amount then needed is the 4.5 million, correct? That would be the total grant scheme.
The total expenditure is 4.5 million, and 3.1 would be coming from grant revenue.
Right.
And 1.4 could come from that contingency for 2024.
Okay.
And then we could have a discussion about where this committee sees the funding source for the
25.
the remainder, 25 and 26.
Perfect. Thank you. Ladies, I can't see if Jordan has a hand up, so you'll have to remind me if he does, sorry. Or Jordan, just put on your mic if you feel you have a question. All right, so with
Okay,
that,
I will, thanks.
thank you. This committee, where we, I think it's been explained to us where we can find the funding sources. Go ahead, Deputy Reeve Milhoff.
Thank you, Reeve. I'll make a motion to start off conversation here. That the committee recommends to council the broadband fiber to the FTTX project draft 10-year capital plan, including the 2025 capital budget with 3.1 from grant revenue and 1.4 come from contingency. For 2024, sorry, not 2025, I apologize.
Okay. Any comments or questions on the motion for 2024? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
I do have, I do have a comment, sorry.
You bet.
Just with all the other priorities and stuff like that through the municipalities and I don't know and other priorities at residency as well. I won't be supporting this motion or the investment into the project. Access to the internet, yes, it's important. There are many businesses in Clearwater County that are ready, that do have access to fiber, to access the internet. So I just think that there's many other priorities to invest in.
Deputy Reeve Mello?
Thank you, Reeve. For me, I support this predominantly, honestly, because Nordig and Ferrier are built. And if we don't build them out further, it runs a deficit in perpetuity. This ensures the project itself doesn't continue to do that. The province of Alberta and the government of Canada have shown the value in this project as well. And I've gotten numerous phone calls from Nordig in particular. And anytime we go out there, when can I hook up? When can I hook up? When can I hook up? Starlink is not ideal for a lot of the places in and around Nordig, and we already have the infrastructure in the ground. We need to do the next step and actually hook people up, and this is the next logical step for that. And I think that there's value to be had there, particularly in those communities.
Thank you. Councillor Logie?
Thank you, Reeve Swanson. I just for a reminder for me, in the 2024 budget, how much did we allow for contingency within that budget?
Ms. Serna?
Initially, it was 500,000, but then there was a, just let me bring up my document here, 2,081,644 additional tax revenue due to the additional assessment in the non-residential assessment class that was not taxed before because it wasn't built. It was new infrastructure that was built, and those non-residential properties now became taxable in 2024 because they didn't qualify for the tax holiday for that new infrastructure.
Okay,
Thank you. And the question was really just kind of confirming that this is an appropriate source of revenue for this, in that the 2024 budget only allowed for a $500,000 contingency, and even with sourcing this for this, there's still $700,000 in that contingency. So I think it's an appropriate source for funding this.
Yes, thank you. And I will be supporting this too. If I go back to our last council meeting, and we had a presentation by Unstoppable, and there was an outcry from, in my opinion, from the businesses that are wanting something different, and they need this support. They are wanting economic development, and I can't think of a better tool in the toolbox than to have better connectivity to support existing and also to help attract new business. So taking a step back is to just let it be is not an option for me. This is something that going forward, this isn't a decision for us. This is a decision for the next generation. So, and the generation after that. So I think that they will, and as mentioned by Deputy Reeve Melhoff, I mean, the partnership with both the Alberta and Canadian government right now, it's quite a feather in our hat, and there are a lot of municipalities in this province that are a little bit green with envy with what we've been entrusted with and they are watching and they are looking to make sure, even the ISPs. I was out in Nordegg for the community and there was advertisements for for Bears Paw. It was, they had representation there. They're waiting for us to put this in the ground. There are ISPs that are looking. I had another one from Rimby area that, hurry up, get things happening because we want to be on the network. So this to me is going to help our residents in the future. So I will be supporting this. Go ahead, Ms. Serhan.
Yeah, there will be no time that this will be more cost effective than currently with the 66%. 75% of eligible, but overall, it's a 2/3 support, even to the non-eligible costs when we calculate those non-eligible costs in. So those going to those properties that I said is saying are serviced well enough, and waiting a generation to do this would cost hundreds of millions of dollars because the grants would no longer be there and the cost to do it would be accelerated. So yeah, this is the most cost-effective time for Clearwater County to do this if they're going to do it.
Agreed. And going back to Councillor Cermak's comment in regards to partnership, I can't see this stopping any partnership. If anything, it's going to enhance and attract way more partnership in the future. So that's great. Okay, so the motion is for the 2024 budget adjustment for the 5.4 million between grant revenue and contingency. If there's no other further comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed?
I'm opposed.
Thank you. That motion's carried. We have a second recommendation. That was a long-winded one that Mr. McDonald read at the beginning.
I actually think I messed them up and I did them backwards, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I did the 2024,
Yeah.
I kind of did the second one first, I apologize.
Yeah, no, you did the,
So,
the 2024.
because now it'll be the 10 year, which is actually recommendation number 1, I believe. But I had a question for Ms. Serhan. In looking through, sorry if I
Nope,
if
yeah,
I may.
absolutely.
In looking through the year ends, says that core infrastructure is at 17 million. So that could be utilized then for the 2025 without hitting any of the other reserve funds for any of the other capital and or operational projects that we have on the go.
So there was some adjustments made January 1st just due to the, so when the restricted surplus transfers came to council, it was the item before the financial statements. So when the financial statements were published, there was some restricted surplus transfers that didn't happen the way that council said they were to happen. So that was it took me a long time to get those restricted surplus accounts calculated to what they should have been. So we've made those adjustments, and as of January 1st, 2024, there's, just let me get the right number here. 12,175,000 available in that core infrastructure fund. And there will be additional revenue in 2025 due to the tax holiday coming off. Now, I know that I spoke at a meeting earlier in the year saying it would be around $10 million. And that's the, I guess, the downside of trying to estimate before you have actual numbers. When the numbers came in, it looks like it's, even if all of the assessed properties didn't have depreciation, which some of them will because they're 3 years in use already, the total revenue looks like it's about 7.3 million, so it's not quite at that $10 million mark. And then there will be depreciation, but then again, there will be construction in 2024 that will be added in 2025. So, it's really hard to calculate what that estimated tax revenue will be for 2025, but, you know, a good conservative number would be between that $6 and $7 million mark. So there's definitely enough between that core infrastructure fund and the revenue, the additional revenue in 2025 to fund that 2025 construction. And then with the additional surplus in 2025 and 2026, then when the project moves to the second phase, there would likely be enough with the surplus in 2025 and the additional revenue in 2026 to fund the second phase. Now, that being said, there are other projects and priorities that are identified on the list. So that would mean like finding other funding sources for some of the Nordic projects perhaps, or the other items that are on the list for 2025 and 2026. So council will have to really dig into that capital plan and set those priorities for 2025 and 2026, keeping in mind that these grants have a deadline of March of 2027. It's not like there's the construction season of 2027. They put March 2027 because that's their year end, and it gives the municipality till then to get all their documentation together, but only utilizing that 2026 construction year. So maybe I'll ask Director Hagan to chime in.
Director Hagan?
Thank you. I concur with Ms. Serhan and just wanted to build on a couple of the points she raised. While we're looking specifically at broadband here, as that's the point of this committee, council as a whole does need to balance this against all the other priorities that it has. So when we're suggesting looking for a funding source at this point, I think it is a wholesome discussion to have at this committee level. Keep in mind, it's not a decision yet. It's a recommendation to council. And let me ask Ms. Serhan perhaps for some advice. Does the committee necessarily need to identify a specific restricted surplus account, or at this point, would a recommendation, if the committee suggests to council that it come from restricted surplus, would that build into that further conversation as to which specific surplus and how to fund that surplus and so forth?
Correct. That could be identified by this committee, just saying that the committee recommends that we use restricted surplus, and then also recommending to council that surplus transfers happen to identify those restricted surpluses that are going to be used for this project. And also keeping in mind there is that $5 million in the Public Works capital for future development, that there's no project identified, so that could go to fund a different priority. So and there is dollars in that tax rate stabilization fund that could be used if council feels that those funds could be put back to an amount that's reasonable, or wherever council sees that fund sitting over time. Those funds could be used for one of the capital projects temporarily, and then fund that that account back up over time, considering that there is all this assessment in the non-residential assessment base that has had this tax holiday for 3 years. So that is revenue that will continue past the 2 to 3 years that we're going to be funding this broadband project, and could be used to supplement the tax rate stabilization fund over time. Again, I guess just giving council the opportunity to have that discussion, I guess, at the October 29th strategic planning session.
Okay. Councillor Lahi?
Thank you, sir. So what I heard there is there are restricted surpluses that are suitable for funding this. Based on setting priorities, are this committee's recommendation to set a priority by council to those time-sensitive projects that may need to be completed within a time frame. That it's important to set the priorities to those projects, and that we don't necessarily have to say no to other projects because of that. There are potential less time-sensitive projects that can be completed at a later time if we shift the priority to this time-sensitive project.
Ms. Serhan?
The other, I guess, way council could decide or this committee could recommend is through a debenture. And we did see that this project is going to be, you know, a long-term asset. It's not something that we do year over year that doesn't make sense to fund through debentures. There's a few projects likely that if this council so chose to use debenture as funding source, that those assets live or have a useful life longer than just the few years that need to be funded. So some of them could be the facilities, the AGREC facility, or the operations and administration facility. That's also the transfer stations and the broadband project. So those are long-term assets that likely make sense to use today's dollars to fund those projects, being that inflation is larger than what it would cost to debenture. And that's what council will need to decide what their priorities are, and if that's an option for this council or this community to debenture to kind of secure funding at today's dollars and have those projects done in today's dollars instead of taking the chance on inflation increasing higher than what the cost of debenturing is.
Deputy Reeve Melhoff?
Thank you, Reeve. Prior to the ugly debenture word, I heard we can do everything. So, like,
Just not
I thought,
1 year.
no, but even if we did debenture, we can't do it in 1 year. We don't have enough staff, we don't have enough resources, we don't have, like, so even if we were like, let's spend it all, we don't have the ability to do that anyway. So prior to that dark hole that you sent us down, I heard we can do everything. So maybe that's not what I heard, but that's how I'm choosing to hear it. And I think that we need to, as the broadband committee, not get too far in the weeds of the actual funding sources, because we are down a teammate. And we need to keep in mind that that teammate needs to be involved in funding sources for all of the other projects. So in saying that, I'm actually going to go out on a limb and make another motion that the committee recommends to council that the broadband fiber to the X FTTX project draft 10-year capital plan, including the 2025 capital budget, with funding sources coming from restricted surpluses to be identified by the strategic planning committee in October. And grant revenue, yes, but the strategic planning committee could have will be referencing that in October. And I would also like an update then on what these surpluses look like, considering the ones that I'm working off of are out of date.
Yep.
And then we can have a better wholesome discussion on all of the different projects with our full team.
Agreed. I really agree wholeheartedly with the comment that the whole team needs to be here to discuss those funding sources for all of the projects and the priorities that are on the 10-year capital plan. I just want to make sure that we're not, that all the options are on the table, and that, we don't just discount one right off the bat. I think, once all of the projects are in front of the council team, then we can have a better, really robust discussion about funding sources and priorities.
Absolutely. And appreciate the comment in regards to this is a wholesome discussion, and priorities are with the whole team. So, this is great. Okay, so motion's on the table. Any comments or questions on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? And that motion's carried. All right. Yes, we are gonna take a, we're gonna take a break for 10 minutes and then we'll go into our closed session. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, welcome back to our Broadband Committee meeting for September 17th. We're just looking at the screen at the updated minutes from the Broadband Committee meeting from Friday, August 2nd. So we are going to need a motion to lift the meeting minutes from the table. Deputy Reeve Melhoff?
I would make the motion to lift from the table.
Thank you. All those in favor? And that's carried. Now looking for a motion to, or comments, questions in regards to meeting minutes. Go ahead, Deputy Reeve.
Thank you, Reeve, and thank you, Tracy, for reviewing those and making the required amendments. And I would make the motion that we approve as amended.
Thank you. Is there any comments, questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that motion's carried. Thank you. So now we are moved down to the closed session of the agenda. Looking for a motion to go into closed session. Councillor Lougheed makes the motion. All those in favor? And the motion's carried. And welcome back. We are now in open session, or we just come out of closed session. And there are no motions coming out of the closed session. And so therefore remains just one more item on the agenda, which is adjournment. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Graham. All right. All those in favor of adjournment?
I'm in favor.
Thank you. And thank you very much.